Couple of additions again for the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 2.0 9mm. Did order this Hyve Technologies backplate. You can order these in several. I think they probably got 8 or 10 different colors. This is the copper color, or kind of more of an orange. And you can also get different types of engraving on the back of it or nothing. I chose to do the Hyve engraving on the back of it. Also received today this aluminum trigger. And again, this is a more traditional trigger. While it is curved, it's lightly curved, but it does have the trigger safety in here, the dingus. So be replacing that actuated trigger on the M&P. Again, it's not a bad trigger. Actually, it's a really good trigger, but I just really want to go with something that doesn't have that actuated trigger on there and not really change the internals out much. Okay, so here I have the shield broken down. Going to start off with replacement of the factory plate with this new Hyve aluminum back plate. First thing we have to do is we have to get the tension off by pulling. See if we can get a view of this plate right back in here. I'm using a 1/8 inch punch, so I have to get that in there. I have to pull down, and then I should be able to get this to slide out. Okay, once we get it out, I'm going to put my hand over this before I release the punch just so nothing flies out. Now we got it out. This is the factory one. It's plastic and has an aluminum plate inside of it. So the next thing we have to do is put the new one partially in. Then I'm going to have to put some pressure on this plastic collar to push it down, so I'll use the back of the punch to do that. And once you get it started, you should be able to remove your punch and push it the rest of the way in until it snaps. Now on to the trickier thing, replacement of the trigger. So here's the before, and again on this we have this articulated trigger on here. You see how it bends in the middle. It's got a pin right there, and that's part of what you can see, the safety release, that trigger safety right up in there. That actually pushes it back inside of the trigger shoe so that it clears. So now we will put the Monarch in. You've got to remove this locking lever. You move it up to the upright position, kind of beyond where it would be if the slide was in there, and then it should slide out. Next step is removing the roll pin right here. 3/32 inch punch. And it's out. Next step, and you can probably see as I was driving out the roll pin that we do have the trigger pin here, and it actually started working its way up. If not, I would be pushing from this side, and that has to come out. So I'm going to place that in there. So next we'll remove the locking block, which will come out with the slide lock, slide release. Just giving a little bit of a start with a screwdriver to get it going. And then I should be able to remove this as a single unit. Kind of set that off to the side. So next we should be able to remove the trigger and the trigger bar. Now, from everything that I have read online and videos that I have watched, I may have to file a little bit of this down because this particular M&P Shield does have the safety on it. I don't use it, but I want it to be functional, so I may have to ground down about 60 thousandths off of this. And part of what that does is that allows for that shorter uptake. Okay, so the next step is we have to punch out this pin to remove the trigger bar from the trigger. And then the trigger bar should release. Now earlier my spring did come out, but if your spring comes out, one end of this spring does not have a slot in it, the other one does. So if it comes out, you just have to remember that it goes in through this hole at the base of the trigger bar, and then it rotates up and it sits straight up inside of there. So here we have both of these triggers lined up side by side. You can kind of see that the new Monarch is a little bit flatter. It's curved, obviously, and it's not a flat trigger, but it's a little bit more so. It's kind of like this when you pull this actuated end out. They line up a little bit better. Okay, so now we have to put the trigger bar into the new trigger. Excuse me. Got the holes lined out, then I'm going to go from the other side. I'm going to set this down, get it lined up. Try to keep my hands out of the way so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to lock it up. Checked and everything's lining up. I need to continue driving this pin in with the punch. I just need to get it flush on both sides. It needs to go a little farther. Still feels a little bit higher on this side. Now I'm going to take some fine fishing line. This just happens to be some 4-pound filament that I had around, and I'm going to put it through the spring just so that I've got something to line that spring up. We put it back in. So here I have temporarily, without the locking block in there, reinstalled the trigger and just put the 1/8 inch punch in there to kind of hold it in place for now. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to show the issue with the new trigger and the position that it puts it in this farther back position, taking up some of that pre-travel, and the safety. So the safety is hitting back here. So I'm going to have to file off a little bit of the trigger bar at the very tip, like I showed you. Okay, so without the locking block, I have reinstalled it in here, and this is just a test. The pin, the trigger pin, is basically a 1/8 inch pin, so I'm using this punch instead, and I've got it in there, and I have the trigger pushed forward, and now you'll see that the safety still doesn't lock all the way up. So I've still got to remove a little bit more off of this end, because what's happening is, taking that pre-travel out, this is no longer going this far forward before that trigger block actually, that safety actually comes up into here. So I'm having to file some of that off so that it actually passes and blocks it. So I'll file a little bit more off with the pen, and I basically hold it like this, and I file in a straight line, trying to keep that flat. After taking this in and out about 5 times and filing small increments, probably say 15, 20 strokes with the file, now I have gotten it to where, when it's in the outward position, the safety comes back on. So it's just long enough. There's really no significant play. This is a very snug trigger, even with this, just with this punch in there. So take it off, works. Okay, now I have my fishing line around my spring. It's in there properly, and I need to run this line through the locking block. So if you'll see, it kind of goes in through there. And then the locking block slides back into place. And snap that back in. Still have this in place. Now we've got to put our pin back in. And I'm going to check this out just to make sure I've got this trigger lined up by using the punch. Okay. And now I've got the spring ready. I'm going to get it started so that it's aligned. And I need to get it just far enough that I can actually pull. You can see down in here, I've got to pull this spring in while I push that the rest of the way through. This will be much easier without trying to keep it on camera, but let's see if we can do it. Pull it up, push it through, and there we go. It's in. I will finish getting it in, but the spring is in there. So we'll finish getting it through and then finish putting it back together and test it. I had to do a bit of sanding here to make the trigger actually fit without rubbing too much. Couldn't get it to reset without doing that, so I have sanded and reapplied. Pretty much got this assembly, disassembly, reassembly, assembly, disassembly, reassembly back down plenty of times. So good lesson in familiarity with the gun.